I started this program because I kept getting a lot of messages and having a lot of conversations about what a pure relationship is with the Creator, with the living God, not with the entities within the religious world or per denomination, but with the mind that is actually within the Bible. How can I have a fair relationship, a growing relationship, an advancing relationship, a kind and deserving relationship with the mind that is within the Bible? So it is because of these questions that, one, I wrote my book entitled Justification, but two, naming this show after that book and touching on the issues within that book here in a more sure way, in a way that we can mete out and measure issues, situations, thoughts and feelings on what it really means. And in these previous episodes, learning about how the Bible terms the serpent, learning about how the Bible terms Satan, learning about how the Bible terms these things and categorizes them, how does all of it have to do with justification? How does all of it have to do, what does all of it have to do, I should say, what does all of it have to do with justification? Now, the answer is very plain, but I want to go back briefly and just look at what it means to be justified in this context of the term justification and how it is applied. Looking at the book of Job 33, 31 through 33, Job 33, 31 through 33 reads, "Mark well, O Job, hearken unto me, hold thy peace, and I will speak. If thou hast anything to say, answer me, speak, for I desire to justify thee. If not, hearken unto me, hold thy peace, and I shall teach thee wisdom." When we are hearing this term justification, when we are hearing this term justify, an immediate context is the teaching or the unfurling of wisdom. To justify means to give wisdom. When justified, one has been given wisdom. That's kind of vague. When justified, one has and is being taught wisdom. Looking at Job 25 and verse 4. Job 25 and verse 4. How then can man be justified with God, or how can he be clean that is born of a woman? Context. How can man be justified? How can he be clean? When we are hearing this term justify, justification, immediate context is cleanliness. That cleanliness is to occur through wisdom. Justify and justified in these two contexts, from these two verses, from these two different chapters, they are a play on one another. When justified, one is being given or one is taught wisdom. When justified, one is seen as clean. Justification is being taught wisdom for the purpose of being clean. Justification is being taught wisdom and understanding for the purpose of being clean. And the purpose of being clean, not in the context of your skin. You don't need to take a shower to be justified. You don't need to dip in some water and come back out to be justified. You don't need to brush your teeth to be justified. Although, brushing teeth and taking showers, let's do these things. But not for the physical body. This is all for the devotional body. The devotional body needs to brush its teeth. The devotional body needs to take its shower. So how does a body that you and I cannot see brush its teeth and take its shower? In what baptism can such a body go through? Only through wisdom. Only through the baptism of words upon the mind. Now, looking at Ephesians 5, looking at Ephesians chapter 5, looking at Ephesians chapter 5, 25 to 27. Ephesians 5, 25 to 27. I'm bringing this verse out for the illustration of baptism. Ephesians 5, 25 to 27. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. When we're seeing the type of cleansing that needs to be experienced, it is a cleansing of washing, not by literal water, but by the water of the word, or should I say the words. Understanding what the philosophy within the mind of the Bible is, the philosophy of the mind within the Bible is better termed the word. When understanding the philosophy at the core of the Bible, a washing takes place. A washing takes place. This is the only credible baptism. This is the only acceptable baptism. This is the only necessary baptism. This is the only valid baptism. The washing with words. And so hearing that this washing, this baptism is with words, what is to be cleansed? Taking that thought further, a psalm that I bring out plenty of times, Psalm 51 and verse 10, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Psalm 51:10, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. This is what is to be washed. This is what is to be cleansed. This is what is to be justified according to the Bible's mind. The heart of the spirit of the heart, not primarily the human being, but the heart primarily of the devotional conversation. Because we have to remember that, going back to Job, and this term justified being linked to wisdom and cleanliness, wisdom doesn't have a body. You can't eat wisdom and feel good in your physical organs. There is no water of wisdom to wash in. The heart of the spirit of the mind, the spirit of the heart of the mind that is to be cleansed, it belongs to the invisible body that is to connect with the invisible Creator. That is the body that is within. That's why it says, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Justification, when justified, when experiencing justification, one is receiving wisdom for the purpose of cleaning what is within, and not primarily from a human standpoint. Cleanliness must first take place within the devotional conversation. Cleanliness must first take place within the devotional conversation before the being of the human can understand the effect. Looking at Ezekiel 36:26, Ezekiel 36:26, a new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh and give you an heart of flesh. So this is the promise of justification. The renewal of what is within. The renewal of what is within. This is the promise of what it means to be justified. And what again is to be justified? Ephesians 4:22-23. Ephesians 4:22 and 23. That you put off concerning the former conversation the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. This is very plain. What is to be baptized, what is to be justified, is the conversation. The conversation that we have when conceived within the religious world is naturally unhealthy. That's why it is framed and geared towards deceitful lust. Again, this is not flesh-based human. This is all spiritual, devotional, religious, because this is the context of what the Bible primarily deals with. It is our conversation that is to be justified and cleansed, and justified and cleansed for the purpose of renewing what is within it through the wisdom contained within the heart of the mind of the scriptures.
We are to have, as is said and believed when it comes to life and religion, faith. But when it comes to exercising faith, a very crucial aspect of having and exercising faith isn't mentioned. In order to have faith in anything, we need to know what we would have faith in. This book looks into how the Bible defines the process of justification. We are supposed to know what we believe. Personal knowledge will bring life to our experience with the Bible. Get justification to know how to safely take care of your faith.
Now, this is where it gets a little interesting and a little good, or a lot of interesting or a lot of good, is when we ask, what is the conversation to be justified from? Now, justification is cleanliness from uncleanliness. What is the uncleanliness that the conversation is to be cleansed from? And I'm glad that we spent time going through male and female, image of God, serpent, Satan, Balaam, all of that, because all of that taken into consideration, the author of the book of Genesis is moving the reader to understand what their conversation, especially through the illustration of the garden, needs to be cleansed from, like immediately. Looking at Malachi, looking at Malachi 3, 10, and 11. Malachi 3, 10 and 11. What is the conversation to be justified from? Malachi 3, 10 and 11. They build up Zion with blood, and Jerusalem with iniquity. The heads thereof judge for reward, and the priests thereof teach for a hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. Yet will they lean upon the Lord, and say, is not the Lord among us? None evil can come upon us. Now, all of that should sound familiar from our previous episodes. Everything here that was just said from Micah. They judge for reward. The priests teach for a hire. The prophets divine for money. Going back to that serpent and how the Bible and the authors of the Bible connect that serpent to Balaam. To Balaam, who moved for money. Balaam, who moved for the promotion that he sought. Balaam that moved, as it says, for wages. Balaam was hired. Author of the book of Acts, placing their Paul into the same context of that Balaam, in a literary context, using a similar story with similar points from Balaam into there and onto their Paul. Author of the book of Acts is letting their reader know that their Paul is also moving for wages, is also hired, is also moving for promotion. The conversation is to be redeemed from such, and from such characters arises blood in the land, not literal. So from such individuals arises iniquity in the land. The conversation, yes, is to flee from Satan. The conversation, yes, is to flee from iniquity. Now we know what Satan is. This is not an invisible foe. This is a false prophet that is hired to overthrow the philosophy of the then chosen garden. This is not an invisible mythological figure. This is a human being. This is a priest that is hired to overthrow, hired to feign themselves, as it says in either Matthew, Mark, or Luke, as just men. Looking at Isaiah 59, 12 and 13. Looking at Isaiah 59, 12 and 13, what is this iniquity that the conversation is to be justified from through these serpent characters, through these Balaam characters, through these Paul characters? Isaiah 59, 12 and 13, for our transgressions are multiplied before thee, and our sins testify unto us. For our transgressions are with us, and as for our iniquities, we know them. Now, the we here is not you, it's not me, it's not a general person. The we here is in the community of the one that's speaking, and the one that's speaking is Isaiah. Isaiah is in the community of the priesthood. And to the Bible's mind, The notion, the idea, and the concept of sin primarily and firstly has everything to do with what is going on within the priesthood. To the Bible's mind, it is the priesthood that are sinners. Now, as Isaiah is speaking not just for himself, but for the whole, our iniquities, we know them. What are they? In transgressing and lying against the Lord and departing away from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood. Did not that serpent in the garden fulfill everything that the author writing the book of Isaiah says? Transgressing and lying against the Lord, departing away from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood. Isaiah is not speaking to the general population. Isaiah is not writing to someone in Bolivia. This letter, these words, they're not sent to someone in anywhere else except the land of which they are in, and to the people of which they are for. Isaiah is writing to his own people, and when I say people, don't think Jew, don't think anything but priesthood. Isaiah is writing to priesthood, to the priesthood, because they, to the mind of the author, are the sinners. Just as in the book of Micah, the sinners were pronounced. They're teaching for hire, they're divining for money, they're judging for reward. This is the same spirit, same character found in the serpent as here also found in that Balaam character. And it's necessary to understand the link between that serpent, that Balaam, and that Paul, because the author of the book of Genesis is writing a recurring ecclesiastical history. You will always see at some point in time when the chosen garden is flourishing, and you know that the chosen garden is flourishing, one that is hired to transgress or violate the philosophy of that garden, one that is hired to oppress and suppress the minds within that garden, one that is hired to cause a departing away from the mind within that garden. And the legacy of such an individual, they will continue because, as it is said of Balaam, it is all for promotion. Curse me this people and I will promote you. Balaam was to be remembered forever. And I'm not talking Balaam, an individual singular person. I'm talking the role that is played by such generation after generation after generation after generation till we get to Paul, and all that we remember now and recount for any sort of foundational theory is Paul. The cycle continues, and the author of the book of Genesis is letting us know what that cycle is and what to be regenerated from or what to be justified from. The individual conversation is to be justified and cleansed from the philosophy that is moving and pushed out forward from such figures as is that serpent in the garden. These repeating and continual prophets appearing not in the name of the mind of the chosen garden, but in the name of the God that they are sent for, from, through. They are bringing a philosophy that is causing a departing away, yet the members therein don't know it. The members therein picking up that ideology and running with it, forgetting the ideology of which they were planted to maintain an ideology that is so far and so far from where they are supposed to be. The heart of the conversation, the heart of the personal devotional conversation, is to be cleansed from such philosophy in whatever generation that individual is living in. Author of the book of Genesis is letting us know how to pinpoint the individual giving the philosophy that has nothing to do with the intended garden. At this point in time, in this age, we are living in a generation where the remembrance of the hired one exists and persists. Generations prior, there was another. Generations prior, there was another. Generations prior, there was another. 4,000 years, there was another. 4,000 years prior, there was another. Every generation has their Paul. Every generation has their Balaam. Every generation has their serpent. The role will be fulfilled, but the author writing the book of Genesis wants their student and reader to know how to spot that role, how it is, who is playing it, and what not to get attached to.
A Fallen Record, The Christian Transgression, is a book bringing history and the Bible together. We all want to know how the Christian religion began. But does the Bible show error occurring in the early church? This book looks at the origin of the Christian movement, and in a way where philosophical context is shown from the Bible. Learn Christian history from the narrative given by the Bible, and learn how the Bible shows the Christian religion taking another path. In A Fallen Record, The Christian Transgression.
And so what is the advice to not get attached to the generational Balaam, the generational serpent? What can be done? Looking at Romans 12 and verse 2. Romans 12 and verse 2. Valid advice. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Be not conformed to this world. Now, this is not the literal world, the world in question, because we are in the scriptures. The world in question and the context in question in the scriptures is not the literal world. This is the world of the religious world. This is the world of religion. Don't get caught up in the world of religion, but much rather transform your mind. How? By proving what the will of the Creator is. Don't be satisfied with what is heard. Don't be caught up with what is caught up in the shambles, as is the advice given to the Corinthians. Don't get caught up with any of it unless you are getting caught up with the proof of what the living God's will is. Unless you're getting caught up with the proof of what the mind at the center of the Bible is. Being transformed by mind, and not simply mind of natural being, mind of the devotional conversation. That is what the Bible needs justified. The wisdom that is within these pages of the Bible wants and needs the conversation's conscience justified. These words are for the conversation primarily. Everything that is therein is for the conversation to understand how it must act, behave, think, and feel. If the conversation can go through such an experience where now all of that can become relevant, well, then the human being understands will understand what's happening to pick up a sense of the change it must have. But our human being cannot do anything unless it has first an example. And the way that the Bible wants to get our human being right is by setting up the example of the devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings. It's regeneration, it's justification. And the authors writing the Bible, the author writing the book of Genesis, especially the first 3 chapters, they are highlighting certain characters and certain philosophies to let their student know what to refrain from and what to be justified from and what to be justified through. The heart of the devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings is to be justified from the Satan, from the generational Satan. Again, this is not an invisible figure. The generational Satan is a false prophet that has been hired to appear to support the chosen garden. This is an hired agent. An hired agent to throw off the level of consciousness that is within the scriptures for that generation and age. The author writing the book of Genesis, especially again the early chapter 1, 2, and 3, they are writing to let their reader and student know the type of character to be aware of, the method by which they strike, and the reason for which they are active. Yes, they are a hired agent, but they are bringing in a philosophy of a God that is foreign to the then chosen garden. It is their purpose. They are hired to mix what is within that then chosen garden with the philosophy of the God that they are hired to promote. Doing so, they themselves will receive the promotion of generations. Set and done. No question. They will get it. The Bible doesn't care about that. That's evident. It's going to happen. Can't change that. But what can be changed is what goes on within the individual conversation. The individual conversation is to have the conversation that it gains when in the religious world, because it is the generational Balaam that will dictate the philosophy of the religious world. When every conversation is conceived, and when that conversation understands that it is conceived within the religious world, takes a stand and step out, the process of justification can begin. And we can understand through that process where the conversation has gone wrong, past experience, to make sense of it, not make light of it, but to take into account every experience for engaging wisdom to acquire, so that the conversation can be and can have the envisioned experience and also be where it needs to be. Authors of the Bible understand this. Authors of the Bible are highlighting this as a plea to their reader, to their student, to their patient, because the mind therein knows what to look for ecclesiastically, and they are letting their reader know because they know that their reader absolutely does not know what is going on, but will follow automatically and naturally the trend set up by that individual playing the role of the serpent.